Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So I hope you have some bleach close by because you're going to need it after watching this video. I have an article from Dave Futrell. Now some of you may not know Dave Futrell. He's the owner-creator of a website called We Hunted the Mammoth, which used to be known as Man Boobs. And this particular site does nothing apart from selling shit at the manosphere. So he loves to attack men's rights activists, MGTOW, pickup artists, and just about anyone else who disagrees with any aspect of feminism whatsoever. It's kind of astounding how many feminist articles link back to We Hunted the Mammoth. I guess that's the result of lazy journalism and not bothering to actually do the legwork yourself and just relying on one bias source, which I guess in no way would misrepresent the facts in any way at all, would it? No, of course not. So Dave Futrell, Dave Man Boobs Futrell, has written an article for New York Mag, and it's called Inside the Dangerous Convergence of Men's Rights Activists and the Extreme Alt-Right. Now I want you to remember that title. The fact that he has purposely referred to the men's rights movement, or the men's rights activists. The fact that the title suggests that the article is about MRAs should mean that the article is full of examples of alt-right MRAs, correct? That's what you would think, but you know, that would be reality, right? That would be proper journalism, as opposed to the shit show that we're about to go through. And then we have a picture of James Harris Jackson, who it seems is the next Elliot Rodger, and what I mean by that is dishonest assholes falsely associating him with the men's rights movement. And wait until you see the evidence. It's overwhelming, folks. It is so astounding. I don't know how anyone can deny it, really. So anyway, let's dive into this piece of shit article and debunk it.
James Jackson had a plan. Traveling by boat bus from his home in Baltimore to New York City, the 28-year-old Jackson hoped to strike a blow for the beleaguered white race by carrying out a bloody massacre of black men in Times Square, using a 2-foot sword he brought with him for the occasion.
Okay, first paragraph, nothing to do with the men's rights movement. Let's go on to the second one.
He didn't get that far, turning himself into NYC police after stalking, stabbing, and killing 66-year-old kin collector Timothy Coleman in Midtown in a trial run for the planned massacre. In a jailhouse interview, he told the New York Daily News that the murder had been a mistake. He had intended to kill a young thug, or a successful older black man, out with a blonde, an act he somehow thought would scare white girls away from black men.
Okay, scaring white girls away from black men through acts of violence and murder. I can safely say absolutely nothing to do with the men's rights movement, Dave. Okay, so let's go on to the third paragraph and see if he finally presents some kind of evidence.
It's not hard to see where Jackson picked up at least some of his noxious views. He told the Daily News, a regular reader of the neo-Nazi website The Daily Stormer. On YouTube he subscribes to the channels of a vast assortment of alt-rightists and fellow travelers, from Hitler-worshipping revisionist historians who call themselves things like Esoteric Truth and the Impartial Truth to conspiracy-addled right-wingers like Alex Jones and the resolutely anti-feminist, anti-Muslim YouTube philosopher Stefan Molyneux.
Okay, so he was subscribed to Stefan Molyneux. That's about as close as any evidence which is presented here to him having any association with the men's rights movement whatsoever. Now you could say Stefan is an MRA, although I don't know if you'd say he's a typical MRA. And the interesting thing is, if we actually look at this guy's subscriptions, there's about 50 odd subscriptions, and there's not a single MRA there apart from Stefan Molyneux. Now, often you can tell just as much by what people like Dave Futrell leave out as they put in, right? Because if this guy was subscribed to Karen Strawn or Paul Elam or Dr. Random Cam or the Honey Badgers or myself or any other MRA, he would have them listed here. And it would be strange that if this guy is influenced by men's rights activists in any way, that he wouldn't be subscribed to at least one or two of those channels. It would be bizarre. And just because he's subscribed to Stefan Molyneux doesn't mean that he agrees with Stefan on everything. I'm subscribed to a number of feminist channels, but I'm not a feminist. And this line of reasoning has been used before by Dave Futrell. Actually, an article featuring both myself and Stefan. It seems that there was a Canadian pickup artist who liked one of my videos once, wasn't even subscribed to my channel, and he liked one of Stefan's videos once as well. And apparently that's enough to connect him to the men's rights movement, according to Dave Futrell. So it seems that whenever someone commits a hate crime or a crime of violence or something that gets a lot of attention, the first thing that people like Dave Futrell do is they go and look at his YouTube channel and see who he's subscribed to. It's just a desperate attempt to somehow connect the particular person to a group that Dave doesn't like. Like I said earlier, we saw the same bullshit with Elliot Rodger, which wasn't even correct. The statement was he was subscribed to numerous MRA channels when in fact he wasn't subscribed to a single one. He was subscribed to the Young Turks though. Maybe it was the Young Turks that made Elliot Rodger go on a killing spree. I don't know. What do you reckon, Dave? I mean, Dave obviously thinks that you have to get the solid evidence before making a case, right, Dave? Not flimsy kind of allegations based on nothing. No, you like the flimsy allegations based on nothing. I'm not surprised, Dave. But let's go on. Maybe he gives us more evidence. Who knows?
But what is equally disturbing is that Jackson also subscribes to a vast collection of channels promoting the men going their own way movement, a more radical and openly hateful version of men's rights activism, sans even the pretense of activism.
Okay, so MGTOW is not the men's rights movement. You can be both, just like you can be an atheist and an MRA. It doesn't mean that all atheists are MRAs or vice versa, or that one is a requirement of the other. Now, MGTOWs typically don't want to change the system, they want to step out of the system, whereas MRAs want to change the system. So these are two very different views. Now, we do agree on some things, but the fact that they want to step out of the system, typically, and we want to change the system, that's a pretty big indicator that they're not actually MRAs, right? They're not activists for the rights of men, because they're not trying to change the fucking system. And if he's MGTOW, right, or he's subscribed to a number of MGTOW or influenced by MGTOW, then why not put that in the title? Why put men's rights activists? I guess it's just Dishonest Dave doing his typical bullshit, right? Anyway, the article goes on.
MRAs may do precious little actual activism in the real world, but they do have a range of issues that they discuss on a regular basis, some of them legitimate issues they have seized upon largely for propaganda purposes, like male suicide and workplace safety, others generated from their own paranoid fantasies, the supposed epidemic of false rape accusations that leaves every man at risk of being jailed based on nothing more than a woman's word.
Now, I consider this a bit of a victory here. You see, Dave Futrell is the type of feminist that thinks that only women have issues and that women's issues are the most important. And you know the type. We see that all the time. Women first, all the time. That's his version of equality. And the fact that he now mentions that men have issues, albeit to shit all over men's rights activists, but still, he's actually mentioning the fact that we have issues. I consider that a bit of a victory. he's had to acknowledge that there are issues. People like him have reached the point where they have to acknowledge that men have issues too. But he goes on to talk about our paranoid fantasies, apparently, about false rape, an epidemic of false rape accusations, and men going to jail based on nothing more than a woman's word. Okay, keep that in mind. All right, keep that in mind for a little bit later on, because it's very interesting to compare that to an argument that Dave makes himself just a little bit later. But for now, let's continue.
MGTOWs, as they are known, have largely abandoned these issues to focus almost entirely on the airing of grievances.
Yeah, that's right, Dave. That's right. The fact that they have abandoned these issues means that they're not men's rights activists.
They claim to proudly reject women, but seem to spend most of their time obsessing over them, spouting endless rants about the alleged evils of women on YouTube and assorted online forums. Jackson subscribes to the channels of popular MGTOWs, Barbar, Thinking Ape, and Sandman, as well as many lesser-known names.
How do you define many, Dave? Because I had a look at this guy, and he's subscribed to, I think, maybe 7, 8 MGTOW channels. That's including Barbar, Thinking Ape, and Sandman. So, I guess 5 is many, right? I'm guessing you didn't use many there just to make it sound like he's, subscribed to 50 of them or something, right? Because you wouldn't do something dishonest like that, would you, Dave? So keep in mind that Dave defines many as 5, right? So if I can find 5 false rape allegations, I can now say that there's many false rape allegations, right, Dave? Oh, no, sorry, double standards, right, Dave? Anyway, let's continue with the article.
While MGTOWs and alt-rightists regularly spar with one another online, the two movements now appear to be converging, with alt-rightists increasingly spouting anti-feminist, anti-women talking points familiar to anyone who has paid attention to the men's rights movement. Meanwhile, more and more MGTOWs are becoming less shy about expressing their racism, with many openly identifying with the alt-right.
So he brings up the men's rights movement yet again, and he claims that we're anti-feminist and anti-woman. Now, we are anti-feminist with good reason, because assholes like Dave write articles like this, falsely associating us with the alt-right, and by some kind of feminist manipulation of the facts, also with this racist guy, somehow, right? MRAs are somehow connected to MGTOW, which are somehow connected to someone else who's somehow connected, to this guy or something. But he also claims that we're anti-women, which is an interesting claim, Dave, considering we have many women in the movement who are very well respected, including the first one to ever open a shelter for female domestic abuse victims, right? She's revered in the movement, in fact, which is strange, then, that we're apparently anti-women. Why, anyone would think you're lying, Dave. So, why would Dave accuse us of being anti-women? Well, there's numerous reasons. First of all, he could be falsely associating feminist and women together, which is an often done thing by feminists. So if someone criticises feminism, apparently that makes them hate all women everywhere, even though feminist and women aren't synonymous. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that feminism is in itself anti-women, because it tends to infantilize women and see them as a victim class, which I don't think is very empowering, to be honest. Of course, Dave could be accusing us of being anti-women because it's a simple and easy slur to make, right? It's those bad men over there who hate women. Don't need to provide any evidence. Just make the allegation, and that's it. Which is, Dave's level of journalism. Or it could be that sometimes men's rights activists criticise individual women who have done something, or groups of women who have done something. the same way that feminists do that about individual men or groups of men. But apparently it's not sexist when they do it. That's perfectly fine. They can even call masculinity toxic, and that's all fine. There's nothing sexist about that, apparently. But if any MRA anywhere, or any male on the internet for that matter, says anything about an individual woman, no matter what she may have done, then apparently that's condemning all women everywhere as being wrong or bad in the minds of feminists like Dave. So I'm guessing he's saying we're anti-women because of one of those things, possibly all of them. But regardless, he hasn't shown any examples of how we're connected to either the alt-right or to this guy who was planning a killing spree. Apart from the fact that he was subscribed to Stefan. That's just overwhelming evidence.
The two movements are drawn together by a shared obsession with, and paranoia about, the sexuality of women. White supremacists have, of course, long sought to protect their women, that is, all white women, from the sexuality of black men. In the several heydays of the Klan, Southern whites lynched literally thousands of black men based on accusations of rape that were often wholly false, intended to punish those who willingly crossed the sexual color line.
Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because Dave just before accused us of talking about false rape allegations and men going to jail based on a woman's word. And he called us paranoid for saying that, right? I was even suggesting it, even thinking it might be a possibility in some cases. Yet here, Dave uses that exact same argument, only for black men. Apparently, it's an okay argument to use for black men, but just not any other men who aren't black. Now, for the record, I tend to agree with Dave here, that, yeah, it was the case that if a woman accused a black man, it could get him killed. All it took was her word. But what Dave doesn't seem to realise is that his statement here, protect their women, that is, all white women, from the sexuality of black men. What feminists have actually done is they've changed that a bit to protect all women from the sexuality of men. So it's no longer about race, but it is about protecting women and the sexuality of men being evil, right? We're at the point where in universities all you need is someone to make an allegation and you can be kicked out without a fair fucking hearing. There was a case where someone looked like someone who had raped someone. That was enough. Just looking like someone is enough to get you banned from going near that person or various areas of the school. The guy hadn't done anything. He just looked like someone. That was enough. And, they're trying to bring in things like anonymous lines where people can ring up and leave messages accusing people. So there's no recourse if an innocent person gets accused. No way to defend yourself. I mean, too bad if you reject someone or break up with someone or something like that and they want to get revenge on you, right? Just too fucking bad, according to Dave. Doesn't matter. Only matters if it's a white woman doing it to a black man. That's bad. But any other woman doing it to any other man, it doesn't exist, apparently, despite, evidence, Dave. But let's continue.
Alt-rightists today remain obsessed with race mixing. The Daily Stormer, in its trollish but completely sincere style, rails against miscegenation in posts with titles like, exposing the race mixing agenda, and, Tom Hanks' jigaboo granddaughter reminds us why race mixing shouldn't happen. With something close to glee, the site regularly mocks, mud-sharking, white women who end up brutalized by their black boyfriends. In a post last year, Daily Stormer editor Andrew Anglin declared that racists like him react with a lot of anger to white women who have children with black men, because it's our womb. That's right, it doesn't belong to her, it belongs to the males in her society, that is being used to produce an enemy soldier. As racists like Anglin see it, when white women become sexually involved with black men, they are in effect cuckolding all white men. This insecurity about race cucking is undoubtedly the main reason alt-right men are so fond of calling other men cucks, a handy way to project their own anxieties onto others. Anglin assures his readers that the anger they feel about race mixing is perfectly natural. When you see women with non-whites, it's a biological response that you're having, he writes. Women's eggs are infinitely more valuable than men's sperm. So there is an inborn drive in men to constantly protect women. And when you see them with non-whites, you immediately respond negatively. Tellingly, Anglin feels no such anger about white men in relationships with black women. While gross and wrong, he explains, this weird fetish doesn't trigger the same visceral reaction when you see it, because in terms of the survival of the race, it doesn't make any difference. It seems fairly clear that the relative values of eggs and sperm have little to do with Anglin's reaction. Black men dating white women trigger his sexual insecurities. White men dating black women don't.
So that was a big lot of text there, Dave, and absolutely nothing to do with the men's rights movement. Once again, it's strange that you chose to use men's rights activists in the heading, as opposed to, white supremacists or something like that. Considering the article isn't actually about MRAs, because you haven't provided any evidence whatsoever. But, there's still article to go, so let's continue.
MGTOWs are similarly obsessed with women having sex with men other than them. While MRA complaints, especially those involving alleged false rape accusations, often reek of sexual insecurity and aggrieved sexual entitlement, MGTOWs seem to be motivated by little other than their own sexual anxieties and resentments.
Oh, so this is Dave attempting sex shaming here, right? Claiming that MRAs are concerned about false rape allegations due to sexual insecurity and aggrieved sexual entitlement. Yeah, that's it, Dave. We're not actually concerned about innocent men being accused and having no recourse, or people making allegations as a form of revenge, or using false allegations as a weapon, and there being no recourse. Now, the interesting thing, I've seen some government stats from England, and they put false rape allegations at 12%, which is roughly 1 in 8. And that's only the ones which have been proven to be false. In fact, most allegations aren't proven to be true or proven to be false. Most are unknown. So I'm not suggesting that the majority of allegations are in fact false, but it's at least around 1 in 8, 1 in 9, and most probably somewhat more common. And when you set up systems, especially in universities in America, where people can make false allegations, don't need to provide evidence, there's no recourse if they're found to be guilty of making a false allegation. When you set up a system like that, you're actually encouraging people to make more false allegations. Like I said earlier, people might do it out of revenge. They might do it because they have a mental illness, they're attention seeking. There are many reasons why some people do this type of behaviour. Now, once again, I'm not suggesting the majority of allegations. But the problem with feminists like Dave is they just dismiss it. They say, it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. It's such a small number that, we shouldn't be concerned about it. Bullshit. This is an argument about due process. But anyway, Dave goes on to say,
in comment sections and YouTube videos they regularly hash and rehash what is perhaps the central MGTOW myth, that of the cock carousel. As MGTOWs see it, women in their prime live in a state of sexual overabundance and endless male affirmation, flitting from alpha male to alpha male in an endless utopia of casual sex, riding that so-called carousel. Meanwhile, the overwhelming majority of men in their teens and early 20s live in a parched sexual desert, scorned by women, who have eyes only for the studly and confident jocks that have become known, at least among the bitter young misogynists of the internet, as Chads, short for Chad Thundercock. Young women consider him far more exciting than the genuine, nice guys, who remain trapped in an extended period of involuntary celibacy because their shallow female counterparts can't see just how deserving of love and sex they are. MGTOWs see themselves as the innocent victims of a grave sexual injustice, essentially cuckolded by the lucky minority of men who get to enjoy sex with women still in their prime. All this changes when these young women hit the wall, that is, hit the magical age in their late 20s or thereabouts, when their youthful allure begins to fade. Deprived of easy sex they had previously enjoyed with an endless succession of chads, these no longer young women, now desperate, do their best to attract the attention of the kind and hard-working, beta males, they've been ignoring for years. On the forums at MGTOW.com, a fellow calling himself Gibbs complains of one ex-girlfriend who gave her best years to Chad instead of him. She was 24 to 25 when she was with this guy, he grouses. Her prime age of looks and reproductive abilities. He got her in her prime, that motherfucker. Then when her clock started ticking and she wanted to settle down and have a family, she meets me. And I'm supposed to get a ring, pay for a wedding, honeymoon and be her slave the rest of her life? Fuck that. The fact that the cock carousel myth bears virtually no resemblance to anything that actually happens in the real world does not in any way undercut the fervency of MGTOW's belief in it, or the anger it helps to nurture within them.
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, the cock carousel myth bears virtually no resemblance to anything that actually happens in the real world. Bullshit. Look, I'm not saying it's common, but let's face it, it does happen. Some women, when they're younger, play the field, and then when they get older and they're less attractive and there's more attractive younger women, they have less choice, and that's usually when we get feminist articles complaining, where have all the good men gone? And then there are some women who have unrealistic expectations. Now, I'm not saying that the opposite isn't true of this as well. There are men which fit into these categories as well. We don't have any issue talking about them. In fact, wouldn't you say Roosh V is the type to... well, he doesn't write the cock carousel, but you know, the pickup artist version of that. What would that be? The vagina merry-go-round or something? I don't know, right? But he's definitely played the field when he's younger, and I've heard him in recent years talking about settling down and getting married or something, which is just weird when you think of Roosh V. But the fact that he's played the field has probably limited his choice in some ways. And I'm not suggesting that everyone has to be a virgin when they get married. Of course not. And I'm perfectly happy for people to, you know, do what they want with their own bodies responsibly, as long as you're not cheating on anyone or anything like that. But some people don't like the fact that a potential partner may have, you know, played the field for years. And like I said, when you're older, and this goes for Roosh V as well, you're going to be faced with less choice. Now, having said that, let me upset the MGTOWs at this point. I should say that I think the core value of MGTOW, or what should be MGTOW, isn't a bad thing. I think men defining masculinity for themselves and not defining it by traditional gender roles, or, you know, being married or the woman they're with or anything like that, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a conversation we need to have. I think that's how masculinity needs to evolve. I mean, you know, let's face it, men are faced with traditional gender roles on one side, which tells us we have to be the protector, provider, and sacrifice ourselves. And on the other side, we've got feminists telling us that masculinity is toxic and dangerous. So I think it's definitely an area in the middle where men should be able to define their own masculinity, what it means to be a man, and a man should be able to define who he is and what his destiny is without, you know, societal pressures on him. All that stuff is good, right? Let me say up front, I agree totally with all that stuff. Unfortunately, what I've seen in maybe the last year, maybe year and a half, is some MGTOWs becoming more radical and more anti-female. And I think this is fucking dangerous. Dangerous in the sense that all the good work in that previous stuff I just talked about men defining their own masculinity, this anti-women stuff puts at danger, right? It's going to wreck that good work. And what these radical MGTOWs remind me of are radical feminists. We see this with radical feminists who constantly blame all the world's ills on men, right? Everything is the fault of men. If men didn't exist, it would be a female paradise and all this other bullshit that we hear. They focus entirely on the bad aspects of masculinity and only on the good aspects of femininity. And I see the radical MGTOWs doing the same thing, only with the genders flipped. It seems that they blame all the ills of the world on females. And, that's something I can't get on board with. I think humans are fucked up in general. That's both males and females. And I think pointing the finger at just one group and saying it's all their fault is bullshit. Both males and females have really fucking shitty behaviour, and they have good behaviour too. And there's good males and females, and there's bad males and females. So I find it disappointing that there seems to be at least an element of MGTOW moving towards this, if not already firmly in that area. And it's the reason why I don't watch a lot of MGTOW videos anymore. But Dave goes on to say,
MGTOWs are generally young white men stewing in their own aggrieved entitlement, and Chad is always envisioned as another white guy.
Okay, so it goes without saying that MGTOWs are male, right? Because it's men going their own way. It's not people going their own way or women going their own way. So obviously they're going to be men. But are the majority of MGTOWs young and white? Well, I would say the majority are probably white, that is Western MGTOWs, for the exact same reason that most feminists are white in the West. It's because the West is mainly white. So it's not surprising that the majority of both groups is white. But of course Dave is using the word white here to suggest that, they're white supremacists or something. And I don't know if they're young. Are the majority of MGTOWs young? I got no idea. I don't know where Dave has got the notion from that most of them are young. Maybe they are. I don't know. I haven't done a survey finding out the age of your average MGTOW. So I honestly don't know. I just thought of something. I said that the majority of the West is white, therefore it makes sense that the majority of MGTOW and majority of feminists are white. There is kind of a MGTOW movement in Japan. From memory, I think they're called the grass eaters or something like that. To be honest, I don't know a great deal about them, but they're basically the Japanese version of MGTOW. And guess what? They're majority Asian. I mean, who would have guessed that in a majority Asian country, the majority of them would be Asian? That's just bizarre. But let's go on. We've still got more bullshit from Dave to get through.
But he has a black counterpart, a young fellow that the casually racist MGTOWs have labeled Tyrone, basically identical to the young thugs that Jackson, in the real world, planned to kill. With the alt-right still in the ascendancy, the racism in the MGTOW movement is growing more obvious and more extreme.
I mean, is it? I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been watching a lot of MGTOW videos lately, so I don't know if there is a growing racism in MGTOW. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't trust the word of Dave here, because Dave is full of shit. So if Dave is saying that there's a growing racism in MGTOW, then it's probably not true. It's possible that there might be some racist MGTOW. It is, like I said, it's possible that there is a growing racism in MGTOW. I can't say. Either way, though, no connection to the men's rights movement. So once again, I have to ask, what's with the title of the fucking article, Dave? But let's continue.
You can see this clearly in several of the channels Jackson subscribes to on YouTube. The YouTuber who identifies himself as the angry MGTOW more than lives up to the name, literally shouting out endless half-hour rants. The most popular of these, with hundreds of thousands of views, are diatribes calling out white women for a multitude of sins, including the cardinal sin of dating black men. YouTuber X Paulo Doc, meanwhile, identifies himself as both a MGTOW and an alt-rightist. He believes white women, too childish to make their own decisions, need to be expressly forbidden from even socializing with black men.
Okay, I don't know ODOC. I know a bit about Angry MGTOW. I also know he gets a lot of criticism from non-MGTOWs, as do a lot of the newer MGTOWs. So once again, no connection to the men's rights movement whatsoever. Now, we're almost through the article. Hopefully you haven't drank too much bleach. So let's get through the last couple of paragraphs.
On MGTOW forums like Reddit's Men Going Their Own Way subreddit, it's similarly obvious that the alt-right is leaking in. In one recent discussion of cuckoldry, a Reddit MGTOW offers some thoughts that would not sound out of place at some drunken clan after-party. Even married women who proclaim how pure and innocent they are, will fuck some thug convict or dump whomever she married to chase some jackass, T0000009 complains. Females don't give a fuck about culture or society, their family or heritage, they just want some stupid savage to breed them, and it's the only thing on their tiny mind.
Ah, yes, and Dave goes to a Reddit and finds a comment from a MGTOW, and apparently that makes all MGTOW alt-right, which makes all men's rights activists alt-right, which means that the racist guy who wanted to stab black men is somehow part of the men's rights movement, or something. I'm not exactly sure how it all goes together in Dave's mind. I mean, I guess it would be like me going to Tumblr and finding just a random feminist comment, which is, bullshit and over the top, and then saying that every single feminist is like that, including Dave, apparently. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong, with doing a video about Tumblr feminists, but to take one or two comments and then to apply those comments to all feminists everywhere, would be a tad dishonest. But, apparently it's alright when Dave does it. And let's have a look at the tags used here. Men's rights activists, which is strange because Dave didn't give us any evidence that there was any connection to the men's rights movement. Alt-right, angry white men, of course. You gotta get the whites in there, Dave. You gotta make sure that you're racist towards, You gotta make sure you condemn those white bastards, right, Dave? Because clearly all the evil in the world is because of white people. And then James Jackson, which, is kind of obvious, although there wasn't really much mention of him in the article. And Love and War. I don't know why that tag is used. Strangely, though, no MGTOW. I don't see a MGTOW tag, which is bizarre, considering most of the so-called evidence was about MGTOW. Anyway, I'm done. Well, actually, I'm not quite done. You see, I recorded the audio for this about 2.5 weeks ago, and then I took a little bit of a much-needed break and played Rome Total War instead of working on videos. But I've just finished the video, and there's an update I want to add, as well as a story. So let's start with a correction. I said earlier on that the only MRA which was in James Jackson's subscriber list was Stefan Molyneux, and that is actually incorrect. There is one other. Now you may be asking why Dishonest Dave Manboobs Futrell didn't mention this other MRA, and that will become apparent in a minute. You see, the other MRA listed in the subscriptions is one Tommy Sotomayor. Now, in case you don't know Tommy is a black man. So I guess it would be kind of hard to create the manosphere is filled with white supremacists, MRA/MGTOWs, and then point out that this guy was subscribed to a black MRA. It kind of wouldn't fit the narrative, would it, Dave? And this really is the perfect illustration of why shitty journalists going through someone's subscriptions and deciding that certain subscriptions must have influenced the individual is bullshit. It's cherry picking. People like Dishonest Dave go through the subscription list and go, oh, that's someone I don't like, therefore I'm just going to claim that that person must have been an influence, even though I have no idea how often the person watched those videos, or whether they agreed with the videos, or whether they were influenced. Because it suits the narrative, I'm just going to make the claim. But those in the subscription list that don't suit the predetermined narrative are just ignored. It is fucking dishonest cherry picking. Well done, Dave, you dishonest fucking asshole. And Base Fizz was also in his subscription list. Clearly, Base is a white supremacist. You can just tell by the look on his face. He must have been a massive influence on James Jackson. Right, Dave? Right? Yeah, okay. And now for the personal story. Although, I guess technically it's not a personal story. It didn't happen to me. It happened to a friend. Although I was occasionally pulled into the fucking drama, as you'll see. I fucking hate it when people drag me into their fucking drama, but it seems to always happen. Anyway, when I was editing the video you've just watched, and it came to the bit about the cock carousel, I couldn't help but think of this particular story. So anyway, here it is. So I joined Facebook with my personal account, I think it was late 2010. I caught up with a couple of friends I hadn't seen in years who had ran into another friend, and they organised a bit of a get-together. And I was convinced that joining Facebook would be a good way to get in contact with people you hadn't seen in years and had lost contact with. Which, for the most part, is true. It also means you get in contact with people you're probably better off not getting in contact with. Sometimes it's good that you haven't seen certain people in a long time, one of which is the subject of this story. So it must have been early 2011. I got a friend request from someone I knew in the early to mid 90s. I won't use her real name. I'll just refer to her as C. Now, it had been well over a decade since I'd seen C, and she informed me that she got married and had a child, and she was very happy in her marriage. She said to me something along the lines that her husband might not be the best looking guy or the most manly guy, something like that. But, he was a good father and a good provider and blah, blah, blah. Now, I hate using the terms beta male and alpha male because they get thrown around fucking constantly. But those terms do actually suit the people in this story. And her husband was very much the stereotypical beta male that you hear about from pickup artists and MGTOWs and other people who use those terms. He wasn't the most attractive guy, he didn't have much sex appeal, but he earned a fair bit of money, apparently. So anyway, C told me how happy she was and everything was going well and blah blah blah. So I think about 4 months pass, and I get a phone call from C out of the blue. And she says she wants to ask me my advice about something. She said that she was thinking about getting back together with a friend of mine, who I will call Jay, who she hadn't seen in over a decade, but had been chatting to on Facebook in the last month or so. Now, C and Jay had a bit of a fling back in the 90s. I wouldn't call it a relationship. I don't think either of them were having relationships back then. C definitely liked to ride the cock carousel, but to be fair, Jay also liked to go on the vagina merry-go-round a fair bit. They were both sluts. Let's just be honest. They were both massive sluts, and they were slutty together back in the 90s. And that's not a judgment. It was their early 20s. They were exploring, doing whatever. That's fine. Right, none of my business. But this was, over a decade later. And C was now supposedly happily married with a child, which is the point I brought up to her next. I said, hold on a second. Why are you considering getting with Jay when you're supposedly in a happy marriage? And there was an awkward moment in her voice when she ummed and ahed and then replied that she and her partner had broken up a month earlier or something like that. This supposedly amazing, fantastic, perfect relationship the last time I'd heard from her. Had since broken up. And, you know, shit like that happens sometimes. It seemed weird, admittedly, but not impossible. So she asked me whether she should get back with Jay, right? They hadn't seen each other in over a decade, and she now had a child, and she was wondering, you know, should she do this? And I said to her, because you hadn't seen each other in over a decade, and you've only been talking to each other for a short time, take things slow. Right? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying just take things slow and see what happens. It's been over a decade. You've both grown and gone through changes and get to know each other again, right? And if it's right, then that's fantastic. If it's not, then, you know, move on. I found out later from Jay that this advice really pissed her off because she was just looking for me to say, yeah, go for it. That would be great. Turns out my advice was right in the long run. So, 2 weeks later, Jay moves into her place. Now, I found out much later that her husband actually moved out a week before Jay moved in, which would mean that when she was asking my advice about Jay, she was still with her husband, or at least still living with him. So she basically kicked him out and Jay moved in. And their relationship lasted, I think, for about 9 months, maybe just under a year. I can't remember exactly, to be honest. But, you know, it was pure emotion and sex and really nothing else. And although those things can be addictive, they're not really a good foundation for a long-term relationship. So this obviously collapsed and came to an end, which, you know, should have been pretty predictable to anyone on the outside. I know I said be careful, but, you know, what do I know, right? So Jay moved out, and her husband moved back in the same week. I think the term for someone like that is a simp, if I'm not incorrect. So my friend Jay was pretty devastated by the fact that this relationship had fallen apart. He'd really fallen for her. He had a bad habit of falling for the wrong chicks all the fucking time. It was a habit of his. But he realised it was over and he was trying to forget her and move on. And about a month, maybe 6 weeks after the breakup, he starts getting text messages from her. Now, she's back with her husband. The husband's moved back in, and she's now sending him text messages of a sexual nature, flirting with him. Now, this is really bad for my friend Jay because he's trying to move on, and every time he's starting to make progress, she pulls him back, right? And even though there's no chance of them getting back together because she's back with her husband and the relationship never worked, but clearly she wants her cake and to eat it too, right? So Jay's telling me all this, and I'm telling him, dude, you just need a clean break. You need to move on. You need to tell her not to contact you again. You need to cut all ties and be done with it, right? And that way you can move on and you can heal and you can forget about her. But as long as she's still sending you text messages and flirting with you, that's not going to happen. So he took my advice and he told her not to contact him anymore. So she started contacting some of his friends and flirting with them, knowing that it would get back to him. Now, she didn't try this with me because she knows me well enough that I would have told her to go fuck herself. I'm not going to be manipulated by a bitch like that, right? So Jay contacts her. He rings her up and he says, fucking don't contact me anymore and leave my friends alone. Don't contact them. Just leave us the fuck alone, right? Don't want to hear from you anymore. That's it. And she stopped. Now, about 3 months after this, Jay was involved in a car accident. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's a story in itself. So I'll just refer to it for simplicity as a car accident. Trust me, it's an interesting story. But when dealing with the cops over this car accident, Jay finds out that he has a restraining order against him because apparently he was sending her death threats. Now, Jay was in no way a perfect individual. He made a lot of mistakes in his life. But he was also an open book, and I knew him well enough to know that if he said he'd never threatened her, he never threatened her. If he had done something like that in a moment of anger, he would have admitted to it. That's the type of guy he was. Now, Jay hadn't found out about this restraining order because after he moved out of her place, he had moved around a fair bit and had obviously missed any notification that he had a restraining order against him. So here we have someone who married, and like I said, I hate using this term, but it's appropriate, married a beta male because he was convenient and a good provider, decided to dump him for a more alpha type male, and when that didn't work, took the beta male back, and then proceeded to contact the alpha because she wanted her cake and to eat it too, and when he rejected her, she turned to the authorities to make a false allegation towards him. Fucking fantastic. Now, I'm in no way suggesting that all women are like this. They're not. I'm not even suggesting the majority of women are like this. And any MGTOW out there who claims that they are is full of shit. But for people like Dave to suggest that these type of women are a myth is absolute bullshit. They do exist. And let me be clear here. I'm not suggesting that only women do this shit. There are guys out there who do fucking shitty things in relationships too. I've said it numerous times. It's not shitty women or shitty men. It's fucking shitty humans. And let's face it, some people are really massive pieces of shit.